I used to believe that when your own child smiled at you, there was safety in that smile. Not happiness, exactly, and not warmth either, just safety. A quiet assurance that whatever else the world might take from you, that bond would remain untouched. That belief stayed with me longer than it should have, even as the years slipped by quietly, even as my routines grew smaller and my daughter, Elaine, grew louder in my life, even as conversations stopped being conversations and became updates, things already decided, simply delivered to me with a pleasant tone. I told myself it was normal, that this was how aging worked. Parents step back, children step forward. I had raised her to be capable, after all. I had encouraged independence, confidence, and decisiveness. Somewhere along the way, those traits stopped being shared between us and became tools she used on her own. I didn't notice it all at once. Most things that matter don't announce themselves. The moment everything changed came on an ordinary afternoon. Elaine stopped by unannounced, carrying pastries she knew I liked. She set them down carefully, smiling as she talked, filling the room with noise so there was no space for questions. She spoke about her work, about stress, about how difficult it was managing responsibilities. Not once did she ask how I was feeling. Before she left, she asked if she could help organize some things. Papers, files, little details she insisted I shouldn't have to worry about anymore. I told her I was fine. She smiled in that same careful way. Later that night, when the house had settled into its familiar quiet, I opened the desk drawer and found the folder. It didn't belong there. I knew every item in that drawer. I had sorted it myself years earlier, back when I still believed control meant certainty. The folder was thin, neat, deliberate. Inside were documents I didn't recognize. Formal, clean, written in language that sounded helpful but felt presumptive. My name appeared often. Elaine's appeared more. I read slowly. I wasn't panicked. I wasn't angry. I was unsettled in a way that's difficult to describe. The feeling you get when you realize a conversation has been happening about you without you in the room. The papers assumed a future I had not agreed to. They spoke of transitions, oversight, arrangements already forming. Nothing explicit, nothing dramatic, just quiet momentum. I closed the folder and sat there for a long time, listening to the house breathe around me. The walls felt closer somehow, not threatening, observant. I didn't confront Elaine right away. I wanted to be sure. I had lived long enough to know that fear can disguise itself as intuition if you're not careful. So I watched. Elaine began calling more often after that. She spoke with confidence, as though reassuring herself as much as me. She told me about appointments she scheduled, people she thought I should meet, decisions framed as suggestions but delivered as conclusions. Every time she smiled, I listened more closely. People reveal themselves when they believe the outcome is already settled. She began referring to my house as a lot to manage. She talked about my future as if it were a logistical puzzle waiting to be solved. She spoke of streamlining and making things easier, but never once asked what I wanted. I told myself to stay calm. I had taught Elaine to read fine print, to ask questions, to never sign anything she didn't fully understand. I reminded myself that lessons don't disappear just because time passes. One afternoon, I made a call to an old friend, someone who had spent her life working with documents and contracts. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't dramatize anything. I simply asked questions. Her answers were measured but firm. She said, "You need to look at everything, and you need someone who explains it plainly." That evening, Elaine came by again. She moved through the house with comfort that bordered on entitlement, rearranging small things without asking. At one point, she reached for the desk drawer. I stopped her. She laughed it off, but her hand paused just long enough for me to notice. "You don't need to worry about paperwork," she said lightly. "I've got that covered." That was the moment clarity replaced doubt. That night, I made another call, then another. Not out of fear, but out of responsibility. I wasn't angry yet. Anger needs certainty. What I felt instead was awareness. Elaine had mistaken my silence for surrender. She was wrong. A few days later, she called to tell me she was bringing someone by. A professional, she said. Someone who could explain things better. I agreed. The man's name was Daniel. He was polite, careful, well-practiced. Elaine spoke for all of us at first, framing the visit as concern, as foresight. Daniel asked questions that sounded gentle but carried weight beneath them, about my memory, my finances, my ability to manage independently. I answered calmly, briefly, honestly. I noticed how Elaine filled the silences, how she leaned forward when something important came up, as if steering the conversation with her posture. When Daniel asked if I'd like to review some options, I said I needed time. Elaine's smile faltered a half-second. After they left, I sat alone with the quiet. I pulled out the folder again and read it differently this time, not looking for reassurance, looking for truth. The language Elaine favored appeared throughout: transitions, assistance, oversight, words that sound kind when spoken softly. That evening, I contacted Ruth. Ruth didn't rush me. She didn't comfort me unnecessarily. She read everything carefully. She said, "These documents assume consent before it's given. They're designed to move forward quietly if left unchallenged." "And if I don't agree?" I asked. "Then they stop, but you should expect resistance." Resistance came sooner than I expected. Calls began arriving from people who spoke as if they already knew my situation. Appointments appeared on calendars I hadn't marked. Each conversation referenced Elaine's name early, as though that explained everything. I corrected them, calmly. Some apologized. Some sounded surprised. One sounded annoyed. That was when I understood how far the story had traveled without me. Elaine noticed the shift immediately. She arrived one evening without pastries, without patience. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said. "I'm trying to help you." "I know, but help doesn't look like this to me." "You're making things difficult." "No," I said, "I'm making them accurate." She laid papers on the table and pointed where she wanted me to look. She skipped margins, skipped clauses, explained instead of asked. I told her I wouldn't be signing anything yet. Her smile disappeared completely. "If you don't sign," she said quietly, "things will get complicated." "For whom?" I asked. She didn't answer. That night, I opened a notebook I hadn't used in years and began writing. Dates, conversations, names, facts. Writing steadied me. It turned confusion into something solid. The next morning, Elaine sent a long email about love, responsibility, urgency. She spoke of my struggle with decisions. I replied with one sentence: "I need time, and I will let you know when I'm ready." The pressure didn't stop. It simply became subtler. Appointments, calls, quiet insistence. Ruth gave me one piece of advice that stayed with me. Slow it down. Make it visible. So I did. I told neighbors the truth. Nothing dramatic, just facts. That no decisions had been made, that I was managing my own affairs, that I was fine. Elaine was furious. "You're embarrassing me," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm correcting the record." When she left that night, I didn't follow her. I didn't apologize. I felt steady for the first time in weeks. Because once you realize someone is acting in their own interest while claiming it's yours, you stop doubting yourself. And I wasn't done yet.
After that night, Elaine didn't call for several days. The silence felt deliberate, like a test. I recognized it for what it was. Not distance, but pressure in another form. Silence can be just as controlling as constant contact if it's used with intention. I didn't reach out. Instead, I continued my routines. I walked in the mornings. I cooked meals I enjoyed. I sat with my thoughts instead of rushing to fill them. The more I grounded myself in the present, the clearer everything became. One afternoon, Ruth called me. "She's trying to move around you," she said plainly. I wasn't surprised. "How?" "She's speaking to people as if authority has already been granted. Nothing illegal, but it's creating momentum." Momentum. That word again. I thanked her and hung up. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I invited people over. Neighbors, friends, familiar faces who had known me before Elaine decided my story needed editing. We sat together in the living room, drank tea, talked about ordinary things. I didn't dramatize anything. I didn't accuse. I simply existed, present, articulate, aware. That mattered more than I realized. Elaine showed up unannounced 2 days later. She looked tired, not overwhelmed, angry tired, the kind that comes when plans don't unfold as expected. "This has gone far enough," she said the moment she stepped inside. "We need to settle this." "We will," I replied, "but not the way you planned." She laughed sharply. "You think this is a game?" "No," I said. "I think it's my life." She paced the room, rubbing her temples. "You don't see what I'm protecting you from." "Then explain it to me," I said calmly, "without managing me." She stopped pacing. Her voice dropped. "You're getting older. Things change. People take advantage. And your solution was to take control first?" I asked. Her silence answered me. "You never trusted me," she said finally. I looked at her then, not as my daughter, but as a person standing across from me. "I trusted you," I said. "That's why this hurts." Something flickered across her face. Guilt, perhaps, or irritation. It passed quickly. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she repeated. "No," I said. "I'm making it honest." She reached into her bag and pulled out the folder again. The same one. She placed it on the table between us. "Just sign," she said quietly, "and everything settles down." I didn't touch it. "I've already spoken to Ruth and others." Her eyes widened slightly. "You went behind my back." I went in front of myself. Her jaw tightened. "You're being influenced." "No," I replied. "I'm being informed." She stared at me for a long moment, then closed the folder sharply. "If you don't do this, you'll regret it." I met her gaze. "I already regret not stopping you sooner." That was the moment the smile vanished for good. "You think you're smarter than me," I said. "No," I replied. "I think I'm still capable." She left without another word. That night, I slept deeply. The next week brought what I had been preparing for: calls, letters, formal language. Elaine had escalated, hoping structure would intimidate where persuasion had failed. It didn't. Ruth handled communication on my behalf when needed. She was calm, firm, unyielding. The momentum slowed. Then it stopped. When Elaine realized she could no longer move around me, she tried one last thing: emotion. She came to me crying. "I was just trying to help. I was scared." I listened. I didn't interrupt. "I didn't want you to end up alone." "I am alone, and I'm not lost." That was when she finally understood. Control isn't love. Planning someone else's life isn't help. And smiles don't make decisions righteous. We didn't speak much after that. Some relationships don't end with explosions. They end with clarity. Weeks passed, then months. Life grew quieter, but not emptier. I regained ownership of my days, of my choices, of my voice. People stopped calling with assumptions. Neighbors stopped whispering. The story corrected itself once it had truth to work with. Elaine and I speak now, occasionally, carefully, with boundaries where trust once lived without them. I don't regret standing my ground, because here's the truth I learned too late to teach, but not too late to live. Love that requires your silence is not love. Help that removes your voice is not help, and age does not erase agency. If you're still here, still thinking, still questioning, then your story is not finished, no matter who smiles at you and says otherwise.